Hey everybody, we're here today at UMKC at the Bloch School. I'm Sam Kulikov from Social Apex and the Kansas City Pioneers here with Leslie Romo, who's a student here at UMKC and the CEO and founder of Golazo. Today, we're going to be kicking off our new series with UMKC. It's a podcast where we're going to be interviewing and talking to students, mentors, mentees, faculty, professors, and more about what makes them them. Why is UMKC the new space for entrepreneurs and creatives and thinkers? Why is it that Kansas City become a hotbed for new ideas, for innovation, and for winning big? So we're going to start this series off by talking to one of the most accomplished student entrepreneurs we have at UMKC in this current iteration of the class. Leslie has won last year's Student Entrepreneur of the Year award and is finding lots of great stride working with her team, her professors, and the entrepreneurship department here to be building out an amazing company in Golazo. So thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's start things off by really demystifying things, which is the point of the podcast. We want people to know what it takes to really build ideas and build great things. And you and I and many others know that it just starts with trying and being who you are, being authentic to yourself. So tell people a little bit about how you ended up here at UMKC and a little bit about your journey and why you ended up here and how it's been going.
Yeah. Well, I first started I was getting out of high school and I couldn't really decide whether I wanted to get into real estate or go to college. But college was just already a thing that I knew I had to go to. And so when I came, I was in a program in high school where I toured a bunch of colleges and none of it really felt like I really fit in. But then when I came to UMKC, it felt really diverse and I felt okay, this is good. The business school was really good. And I knew I'll get into business because it's very general. So then I could figure it out then type of thing. So that's why I got into business. And then that's why I came to UMKC. And then, yeah, just that's really where that started of how I got here to UMKC.
And so then, coming in from the outside looking in, you see this really great business program. But like me, you don't meet the professors very, very much at that beginning stages, but then you quickly realize oh my goodness, it's the professors and the faculty that actually make this program what it is. So maybe tell us a little bit about some of the people that you have met along the way, some of the professors or faculty that have helped bring that value that you perceived before you even joined.
Yeah. I mean, initially, when I started my freshman year, I was very shy growing up. So it was really hard for me to really go out my way and actually talk to people and stuff like that. So I was a commuter. I'd come in and then I'd leave after class and it was I didn't really have my high school friends were gone. So it was kind of a lonely period during that time. And my cousin would always make fun of me. She's like, I'm your only friend and I'm your cousin. And so it was kind of rough going in, especially being a first generation. Because I was I almost felt I had some imposter syndrome early on because my high school was very much the mindset was very different. People felt they didn't have that drive, and I always knew I had this drive in me. And so there was kind of that disconnect, and I was top of my class in high school. I was up there, and so coming in, I felt a little fish. Oh, I don't know anything. I feel I'm already disadvantaged. I'm not that smart. All that. So I almost would go to my classes initially, and it felt I didn't even understand what they were saying. But it's because I put myself in that mindset of oh, I shouldn't be here. This is But then I went through a situation early on, and then after that I was I need to do something and get involved, and so I did. And so I joined Enactus, which is a social entrepreneurship organization here, and I was well, let's see what it's about. And so there was this project that caught my eye, and because I've always been passionate about I know I want to help the Hispanic community, I want to give back some way. And so where can I find that? And so there was this project going on. It was called Cultura en tus manos. And so it basically what it was is it helped artisans in Mexico expand here to the United States through selling their artwork and stuff. And during COVID, their main source of the income was tourists. So now they didn't have that. So that's why that project was created. But when I got there, they were like, yeah, this project actually is like dead because like nobody's like, the project leader like already graduated, so it's not going on. Do you want to take it on? And like, I had no business skills. I had like no, like I didn't know how a business worked at all. So I was like, what do you, I'm just a member. Like, I don't know how I'm going to take on this whole business and develop it. Like, what do you mean? Like, you want me to do that? And so it was almost because they didn't want to say no and I really wanted to join something that I was just like, yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait, what did I get myself into? Like, I don't know how to do that. And so that's where that started. And so then that's where I met my first like mentor that is still my mentor till now, and like professor, Ben Williams. And he was the advisor for Nactus during that time. And he kind of like led me through like how to build this thing out, like with no business skills. And like the very first thing that I would like freak out about was I'm like, I don't know how to like lead people. Like, I don't know how that works. How do I get a team? How do I like do this? And I was like, I feel like I'm a mess. Like, this is not working. But then like on the outside, then like the members would be like, wait, like you're doing so good in this. And I'm like, no, like this is a mess. And then until I timelined it out and Ben sat with me and like all that. And then he was like, I'm like, but Ben, like I feel like I'm a mess. Like this isn't, like I don't know if I'm doing this right and like all this. And he was like, do you really think that most companies, like, you think like Coca-Cola has it together? Like, no, they put up this front and like all behind it's like a whole mess. But like you don't see that because like it's just all pretty and like whatever, the marketing's great. He's like, no, it's normal. And then that's where I kind of went like, oh, what? Like this is crazy. Like this is a side to it that I didn't know, and it's okay to like. I've also been like, I've always been like very perfectionist, so that was like a hard thing for me initially. But yeah, that was my first mentor, Ben. And then when I like started Golazo and everything, he's always like, he loves soccer too. So when I won the Student Entrepreneur of the Year award, that was like the first person I went to. I was like, Ben, okay, so I have this idea because that idea had been sitting for a while. Like I made it my freshman year because it was like, I was in a class with Alex and it was basically like you had to build a business idea. And I didn't want to do something like basic. I was like, I'm like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, oh, I'm doing a coffee shop. And I was like, I don't even like coffee. Like, what do I do that's like cool? Yeah. And I was like, I had just like finished soccer, but I wasn't playing anymore. But like, I really love soccer. And so I was like, I'm going to make this like really big thing. And I also like worked at a hotel before. And so I had like the sports teams that would come in like for the leagues and stuff. Like I would have to like serve them and stuff. And I was like, wait, what if they build like the hotels right next to it and like next to like the fields and stuff? Like, and it was just like this big idea, like we're gonna have restaurants and like this and this. And I was like, it doesn't matter because it's just the class. Like there's like, I don't lose anything. And so that's sad. But when I won the Student Entrepreneur of the Year award, which I can get into later, that's where I was like, wait, I should actually like really make this happen. And I was like, wait, aren't there like soccer, like is there different forms of soccer? And then that's where I started researching, and that's where I like got down this rabbit hole and then like made this idea and like toned it down to like what it is now. But yeah, and then also that's when like I met Lee Walter, and he, like after I won the Student Entrepreneur of the Year award, like literally the day after, he was like, basically like, he's like, wow, are you gonna make this happen type of thing. And it was almost like, yeah, it's great that you won this award, but like, how's this even gonna turn out? And so he joined during that time. And then obviously when I joined the e-scholarship program, like later that semester, then Alex like really mentored me throughout it, and then got me connected with other mentors and the mentoring residents. And like, it's just kind of gone from there. Coming to Innovators Hub is where like I've gotten a lot of mentors too, and like connections, and like obviously that's how I like met you too. But yeah, that's kind of how it's been, of like getting mentors and stuff about the journey there.
Yeah. So has the imposter syndrome gotten better since day one?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I feel like so much more confident. I feel like it's like crazy, like the growth that I've seen throughout it, because now I'm a completely different person. And sometimes I even struggle with being like letting go of that. I'm still a very shy person because I had to go through so much of like public speaking, like all those stuff, but I knew like I have to overcome this in order for me to like in order for me not to be a barrier.
Yeah.
You know? So, but I still struggle with it. Like sometimes like, yeah, I'm like very shy actually. And they're like, no, you're not. Like you yap so much. And like you, like, there's no way that you're like a shy person because you know, your public speaking is so good. And like, you're always at networking events. I'm like, yeah, but like, if you just knew how much it took me to even like do that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, Ben definitely was keying into something important, which is like, you think, or anyone, even myself included, you know, you look at brands and marketing and business as a consumer for most of your life. And so what you see is perfectly packaged, you know, highly refined, formal communications, very cut and dry. You know, you see, you know, rollouts and different, you know, and you're like, oh, they released a new product and it went on the same date they said, and it went totally fine and it came out. And in the meantime, on the back end, they're like scrambling, like things are on fire, they're pushing code the night before, like, or whatever. And you realize that there is no pretty packaging internally for a business. There is only systems and architecture to help you navigate and grow the business. But the pretty packaging and everything like that, that's just a marketing front, right? Which is needed and necessary, but it's like, but it all is just a plastic wrapper around the core company itself, right? So that was really good advice from Ben, because many people, including myself and many others, they just don't start because they don't know, they think it needs to be perfect. They think they need to have like this business plan and all these things written out, and everything has to, you know, oh, my mission, my vision, my da-da-da-da-da, and I have this, and I have this, and I have all these things. But you don't realize that all you have to do is just start it. And that's the hardest part. And so to your point, it's like, well, I need to get better at, you know, speaking as a professional speaker. Many people would say, well, I'm just not good at that. I'm not good at that. And it's like, well, it's just a skill. You can be good at it if you choose to alleviate that pressure of like your previous, you know, domestication telling you, oh, you're not smart enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not, you know, you don't make enough, or you don't, like, and throwing those all out the window and saying, I want to build something, I'm just gonna do it, and like, it doesn't really need to be perfect, it just needs to happen, right? And so I think that's really important feedback from Ben that most people don't realize, and it's what brings many entrepreneurs a lot of anxiety. Because you're like, oh, it needs to be perfect. Like, you know, I missed the meeting, or I missed this, you know, deadline. I missed it. Oh, it's all over, right? And you're like, no, it's okay. It's all about putting a step in front of, you know, foot in front of each other. And so with that being said, like, how has it been? Walk us through, like, winning the Student Entrepreneur Award was obviously a really important moment, you know, in your journey. But as you mentioned, it was not an end result. It was a beginning point, right? And so talk to us about, you know, going through that process, but then also still having to do the grueling hard work of building the business, right? So it's like everyone's on stage clapping for you, applauding you, and it's amazing. And then you go back to your dorm or you go back to your house, and it's like, there's nobody gives a shit until it's built. And even then they may not care, even though they support you, people support you in general, right? But talk to us about the reality of building the business. It's much different than being accoladed and applauded for it. So talk to me a little bit about that experience of winning, and then what the true costs were after to realize your vision.
I mean, initially the Student Entrepreneur of the Year Award, my professors had told me, like Erin Blocher, she's an advisor for the Anactus too. She was like, you should sign up for this. And I was like, no, Erin, like, all I had been at that point was like, I was a real estate agent, and that's all I had done. And I've done it for like, what at that point, like 1.5 years or something like that. And so I was like, I don't, and the requirements of the Student Entrepreneur was something like there was like 5 things. And one of it was like, it has to be a unique thing, and like this and this. And I was like, but real estate isn't unique. Like, I feel like I know probably a couple other students that are in real estate too. So like, what's unique about that? Like, yes, I did this project, Cultura, or whatever. But so I ended up signing up for it because I was like, well, what can I lose for it? And I really didn't know like the significance or how big the award was. Like, I was just like, well, okay, I'll sign up for it. And so I did, and then 2 weeks later, I found out that I won it. And in my essay, I basically wrote about real estate. I wrote about the cultura en tus manos and being a project leader for that. But then I also wrote, because it talked about write about what are your future aspirations, stuff like that. And at the time I was working for creating like a financial literacy for this Hispanic community. But I also had this idea still like lingering, which was the Golazo idea. And every time when conversation would come up with like, what's a good business idea? I'm like, you know what it is? This idea, like, you should take it. But I didn't want to take the idea, like, because it just seemed like so vague. I was like, I need a bunch of capital for this, and like this and this.
Yeah,
and this.
yeah.
But I just wrote it in there because I was like, it's a nice, I mean, it can't hurt. It can't hurt. So I put it in there, and then when I won it, and then I had a meeting with Laura, and she was going through like what it was gonna look like, what the event was gonna be like, and then she told me like, oh, like the founder, they were like Dave Johnson, and I was like, well, who's that? Like, he was like founder Chicken and Pickle, and then he was like in the Casey Current, like the founder's gonna be there, and I was like, wait, like so you're like, this is a big event, and she was like, yes, like this is a big event, and I was like, whoa, this is crazy, and I just thought it was such a connection of like their sports, and I wrote about sports, and they also had like a real estate background, so I was like, whoa, like I think that's why they picked me. I was like, that can't be like a coincidence, and so I was like, wait, like maybe this can be feasible, and so then that's where I was like, okay, like let's make it happen then, and in that. In my mind, it was almost like, oh, I have to develop this like business idea further, because how am I going to just say like I have this idea and not have it even like developed any of it at all, like not shown any action behind it.
Right.
So I was like, within that month, I was like, okay, I got to go to Ben, and I was like, Ben, I need to meet with this, and literally that's like the week where they started the Innovators Hub. And so I was like, he was like, come Friday, we'll work it out, and I was like, great. And then throughout that month, I kind of started prepping like what the idea would look like and stuff like that, like just ever so slightly. It was still an idea. And then I did my speech and all that. But that speech was really like a really big part for me, because like one, there was like another coincidence that happened, is that I tend to read a lot of books. And there's this book that it's called Leadership, The Good Book of Leadership. And I had gone to the Entrepreneur of the Year award like I think the year before that or something like that, and he was like David Stewart. He was like a billionaire that like had won for his business, Worldwide Technology, and he was giving out free books, and I was like, oh, this book, I was like, well, I'm never gonna read it, but like it's cool to have a book. But one day I did sit down, and I was like, I wrote like a quote down that really like stuck out to me, and it says, the imagination encompasses all you know and connects your head with your heart and soul, and the heart and soul is like, that's what it's called for UMKC, the Heart and Soul Awards. And so I was like, wait, and I wrote it in my essay, and so I was like, this is crazy, like there's like, I didn't know that, like there's just this crazy connection there. But in my speech, I also like set a commitment, and I said that I was going to turn my largest imaginations into actions to create realities, no matter the magnitude of barriers placed upon me. And so ever since then, I was like, I said that was a commitment for myself. And so I was like, if I just said this in front of like a bunch of KC like big business people, like I best believe, like I don't want them to look 2 years after and see like, what ever happened with that girl, which they probably like would not wonder that. But in my head, I'm like, what if they do? They look me up and
you're publicly committed.
So I'm like, so I publicly committed myself to like making whatever I ever had in my mind like happen. And so then that's where I was like, I'm gonna make Golazo happen. And like I just started coming every Friday, and then I joined the East College program and like all that, and that's how like I just started developing it. And then January of this year came along when I did like my first semester of e-scholars, and it was really tough because I had so many, like I was blessed to have like various real estate transactions during that time, but they were also like so tough, like they were not like easy transactions either. So I was like doing these transactions over here, like, and then I was trying to like build this business over here, and I was the vice president of projects for Enacted, so I was helping other students lead I was like 5 different projects, so I was like helping them lead their projects. And so like, and then I'm still trying to do school, and so I was like, what? Like I was quite literally like running on 2 hours of sleep every night, and like I like look at pictures now, and like even though I was like ready and everything, like I looked completely dead because I was just going, and it was really hard. But like now I look back on it, I was like, dang, like I built the business in 8 months from something that was like just an idea in my head, and that's like really crazy. But Yeah, like what was the other question that you had asked me?
I think it was just like bringing it into reality.
Yeah.
So now you committed to it. And then, as you said, like once you say it, there's a lot to be said about publicly, talking about your ideas, is it does bring, like, whether it's meant to or not, it does bring a like, hey, this kind of has to happen now.
Yeah.
It brings some accountability, which a lot of times is why people tell others what they're doing or what they're working on, is they're trying to subliminally give themselves that motivation, or subconsciously. So, but then, talk a little bit about, like, you had to make this idea, you had to spend those 8 months, but those 8 months, as I tell many people, and even now maybe, it's not sexy, it's not cool, it's not fun, really, generally. And that's the part that everyone misses. They don't see it ever.
Yeah.
Right? They don't see that moment. So talk to me about, not necessarily what you actually had to do, but talk to me about those 8 months when you were sleeping for 2 hours every day.
Yeah.
Like, walk me through how that actually feels in the moment. It's like one of those things where you're, oh, I'm such a badass hustler afterwards, but during you're like, this is awful.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're like, this is terrible. And you only have your compass to follow. So talk to me about the reality of actually do the day after the speeches, and now you have to do the stuff to even talk to those people again. Yeah. And so tell me what the reality looks like when you're committed to something you care about, and like what that actual sacrifice maybe looks like. Again, it doesn't need to be like specific anecdotes, but more of like how you were feeling. Like, how did you feel? Did you feel like giving up? Like what was going through your mind like midway through those 8 months when you're like not eating enough, not sleeping enough? Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah. I mean, it was really tough dealing with the fact that, like, again, like face forward, like so many people were like, oh, she's so successful. Like she's like this 21-year-old and she's like doing real estate and she's doing that and doing that. So like from the front, like people would see me, like obviously like I always like dress up. So like even that was like, she always has it 100% together. And there'd be like students that I'm like I remember telling this girl, she was struggling. She was like, I just can't, like I'm going through it. I was like, I feel you. And she was like, no, you don't. And I was like, no, I do, like, trust me. And she's like, no, you're so put together, like you never mess up, like, type of thing. And I'm like, no, like I'm trying to tell her, like I do, like I go through it and it's really tough, but like obviously then I show up to school and I'm making sure that like I show up as the best version still, even though like I'm on 2 hours of sleep over here, Yeah. But it was really tough. I mean, sometimes like even going through like to networking events was such a big thing. And I would literally like wake up in the mornings, like just like sick to my stomach. Like I did not want to get up. Yeah. I would procrastinate my day. And it would like, sometimes it would like, I would be so nervous. I couldn't even eat because I was like just throwing up of how nervous I was. Or if I had like a speech I had to give or like those things, like it was really hard. And a lot of times like my friends and stuff, like my closer friends would see like, oh no, like she's actually like, they would see that behind the curtain, and they'd see like, no, like she goes through it, like I broke down like so many times and I was like, I just can't do it anymore. Like I can't, like sometimes, because it's hard to do it. And so it did feel, I mean, sometimes I didn't have time to feel anything because I was just like, get up, go do it again, get up, go do it again. Yeah. And I mean, the other sacrifice was that like I live at home and my parents wouldn't see me like weeks on end. Yeah. Because like when I would come back, like they were sleeping already. It was 2-3 in the morning, and they didn't see it. Like my sister would never see me, and that was like a tough thing for me to like deal with. Is that like I'm her older sister, and I feel like I'm almost like a mom to her, and so I'm like I'm not even there for her, like all this. So that was like another sacrifice that I had to do throughout that, and like
you don't know where the sacrifices even end. I think that's a big challenge for so many when they first start out. Is you think, and I think it's rightfully so for many entrepreneurs, but it's different for everyone, where you're like, I'm not eating or sleeping until this business is done or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, you just don't know, am I supposed to work 10 hours today or 9 or 8? Or it's like, what? Yeah. What, and that's what makes the sacrifice hard, because you're like, I feel guilty about my sister or my parents, but I know I need to be working. But you're like, but did I need to stay that extra hour? I don't even know. Like, you don't really know. It's all like, kind of an approximation. That's at least for me what makes it so hard is you're like, shoot, I need to miss out on a birthday party, and it's like, whatever I'm working on better be worth it, right?
Yeah.
It better be important, but you don't know in the beginning.
Yeah, you don't know if it's gonna,
like I was taking a free coffee instead of seeing my mom. It's like, will it? But then it's like that free coffee is what your next partner. And so I think that's what's really challenging. So talk to me now about your evolution to, becoming a little bit more healthy, and taking care of yourself and prioritizing yourself, right? We talk a lot, and I've talked to you about this a lot off camera, but what I tell a lot of entrepreneurs is that it's not necessarily always about the product or the idea, it's about you as a person. And if you're not prioritizing yourself, which comes from family, friends, spiritual, mental, physical health, if you don't have those things, the product diminishes because you are the product.
Yeah.
Right. So now it seems like, based on what you're telling me, that things are getting better. You're finding a better balance. You're finding a more healthy, work-life balance, which I think is so important. And it's not about working less. It's about working on things that are important, impactful, using intent, and making sure that you're not wasting time and that you are taking that hour for your family. But it's like that hour used to be spent on something that wasn't necessarily needed, right? Or whatever. So talk to me about transitioning from that kind of white knuckle redlining entrepreneurship to like, hey, if I'm going to do this for years, like it probably should be a little bit more comfortable to do this because there is no end, right? So you realize that. So tell me a lot about how you made that transition and where you're at mentally now.
Yeah. I mean, I was basically on survival, and what would get me through is like, well, I have like summer break in like 2 months. I just gotta get 2 months, 2 months. Like that's all I gotta do. Or like I get through, like when I did RVCC, I'm like, I just gotta get through that. And then after that, it'll be better. But then then the next thing came, or like I had to deal with like a real estate thing over here. So I really was like not, I was always like thinking, I mean, I always 100%. Do that, but like I could never like, really like let go even when I was taking breaks. So like even when you're like that taking breaks, you're actually not taking a break. Yeah, 100%. Just thinking about it. But like now, I will say that's still something I struggle with because I grew up around like a very like workaholic family where it's like you cannot be sitting down if you're in the house, like you can't take naps, like you can't like, and it wasn't that like they were super strict, but it was just like my parents worked, and like coming from immigrant parents, like that's a really tough thing to like work through. Is that like, to me, like I want to say thank you to my parents by showing them with my actions, like, hey, thank you for these resources that you were able to have, like let me take this to the next level type thing. And so that's like a hard thing to still deal with, but now what I struggle with is that now I do take more like that free time and like more self-care and like stuff like that, and I still get that mindset of like, oh, I'm kind of slacking. I'm slacking right now. And that's kind of what I'm dealing with right now is like, I do have a better balance, but now I feel this like guilt still of like, oh, I'm slacking. Like, what do you mean? Like now I have a Saturday to do something.
Well, you kind of feel like you said, when you have those pockets where you're not doing anything, you're like, wait, I feel like I should be doing something. But what I think many entrepreneurs do, including myself, and this is something I'm learning as well, I'm 6, 7 something years in, and I'm still learning it. All of those lessons, imposter syndrome, work-life balance, etc. But what I'm realizing is that most of our greatest minds, they had a high appreciation for the spiritual and the mental and life and real life. So many of the most famous people that we know, and I'm sure you've heard this anecdote, but it's like they all read. They all read for hours a day. Like you and I, I'm a reader too. So but even we probably read way less than we should. And we're like, well, I'm going to read instead of answering emails. And then it turns out those emails are all dumb and didn't even need to be replied to. And so I think what people forget is that the human experience itself is what informs us as entrepreneurs. If you go back to that book quote that you talked about, which I loved, which is like imagination compass is derivative of your soul and heart telling you what to do. And most people don't follow that compass because they are distracted by why they can't or why they shouldn't. And so to your exact point, it's about building a real framework around the things that you care about, using your imagination as a compass, but then keeping a check in reality of saying like, I have to be connected to the things that bring me joy and happiness. And that's the hard part is a lot of people are using their entrepreneurial journey to bring them purpose and to bring them, joy and happiness when that's not necessarily what it's like. It may be for that, but like the joy and the happiness and the purpose comes from doing the thing at the core. It's your why. It's not necessarily the success and the power and the fame, but then you forget that like your why is inherently connected to your family, to your values, to your identity, to your history, right? Like I am a son of an immigrant as well. And I feel the exact same pressures you do, right? Where, like most of my family isn't here anymore. And like there's family that I don't know where they even are anymore, right? Because of extraneous circumstances. And so then I'm like, shit, me and my sister, we're it. Like if I don't do something, like my line, like this all ends here. Like I have to make sure, and that stress is real because you're passed down the trauma of your parents' like stuff, right? That's a real thing. But then at the same time, you have that guilt where you're like, if I fail, like I failed, so many people. Yeah. But you forget that they didn't exist for you to be successful. They existed for you to find happiness and joy. And because, my ancestors 4 or 5, generations past weren't ever going to be like, oh, Sam, like I'm going to have a, great grandkid who's going to do marketing stuff. Yeah. They're just like, we want to survive and do whatever we can so that our future, generations can be happy and fulfilled. Yeah. And that's what I think is so powerful about entrepreneurship is it's not a methodology for us to find our purpose and to find all of these bouts of success, which do come from it. It is more so a vehicle for us to become who we always were and gives us the sandbox to try and test and fail and to become. And back to that original point of like, you feel like you owe people something, so you never take time off, and you forget that one big thing is if you don't take care of yourself, you actually don't get to do a good job. Like you won't be able to do as good of a job if you're not the best version of yourself. And so I think that's one of the biggest lessons that, people can learn from, one of your stories is like, you've balanced and juggled all of these different things. You've created this great persona where people see that, hey, it's, she built a great brand, but that it's really difficult. Yeah. Well, it's a great lesson for other people because it's like, you need to make sure that, when you're with people that you're giving them your best effort and like you're giving them, your discipline and your input. And that's what you do is you show up, even if you're not feeling great about the idea, you're throwing up, you're showing up and you're doing it and you're actually doing something about it and you're bringing your full, aptitude to it. Because what a lot of people don't do is, or what they do, is they say, oh, I'm so busy and da-da-da-da-da. And it turns out they've worked for 4 hours on something non-needed. Yeah. And you're like, no, you need to, it's like, you do have time to like go to the gym. You just don't know how to organize it and set it up and you need to build those systems. And so that's a whole nother topic. But I think the moral of it is people forget that we are not built to just work and to just be these output machines. We're not a yield machine. Yeah. It's okay to have days where you just sleep all day and you do nothing, because that's not, we weren't built to make companies. Companies are just a construct of human beings and human nature. But more so, what I hope for many entrepreneurs and what UMKC program helps teaches is like, it's not just about the classes you care about. It's also psychology and art and culture. All of these things inform and help you create the vision for who you want to be and for what you want your company to become. And so I think that's a really great kind of point for us to sort of close out on. And I'd love to get kind of your final thoughts on, what have you learned about yourself on this journey? Not about, who you could be or, learn what skills you could have, but more so like, how has entrepreneurship given you that ability to realize the dreams that you had when you were young, right? When we're 11, 12, we have so many ideas and passions and dreams and we lose touch of that. Yeah. And entrepreneurship gives us a chance to reignite those. So talk to me a little bit more about like, what does that feel like being able to use this, knowing you'll fail and succeed, but you have a path. You actually have a platform to test and to grow and to fail. How does that feel knowing that, you get to realize those dreams that you had? Yeah.
I mean, it's really great because I realize like they always say that like when people don't know what to figure, like what am I supposed to do in life? Like what's my purpose and stuff? They always say like, look at the things you did as a child. And those are the things that you need to tap into because those are the things you did without like any like things of like, oh, I need to do it because of money or like whatever. It's like you truly like to do those things. And so I noticed patterns with like entrepreneurship of like, I used to like, I was like playing office like as a kid. Like I loved, like I always wanted an office, or like I love doing puzzles, or like just certain things like that I noticed that are like habits that I had like when I was a child. And then I'm like, wait, that, you know, in entrepreneurship, you're connecting the dots. You're putting the puzzle pieces together. I love to play like board games and Monopoly and stuff like that. And it was like, that's what you got to do. You got to know how to play the game of life. But this is like real life, you know? So that's like what you do. So those are things that like I've learned along the way. But as far as like what I've learned about myself is that really the things that you should tap into is that you don't always have to like have it together. And like all you have to do is follow that curiosity. If that's like in your mind, it's for a reason, you know? And so if it's like, and like, that's what I told like a lot of students is like, but I don't know what I'm like meant to do. I don't know like what to do. I'm like, if you're curious about it, try it, because then that's going to lead you to that. And that's going to lead you to the next thing and the next thing. And so, but as long as you're feeling that curiosity is put in you for a reason. So it could lead you to that path. And like, you know, people sometimes connect it with like faith, and that's like God leading the path and stuff like that. But I really think that's a big thing that I've learned from that, and like from my journey of like just follow that curiosity and that 90% of it is just showing up. 100%. Like 90%, and then it sounds so cheesy, but that is true. Like, and that's where I've really pulled that to heart. Is like, and I want to make sure that I'm always the most like hardworking one in the room. Like I'm gonna be there. Like you best believe. Like I'm gonna be there. Like, and I think the other thing too is like resourcefulness and being able to like, okay, you don't have to have 100 resources in front of you to make it happen. But like, how do I look at this 2 resources that I have in front of me, and how do I take this so that I can move to the next step? Okay, now I got 3 resources. Okay, now how do I take these to take it to the next step? And it's more about that rather than feeling like you need all the resources, because I didn't have those resources, you know? Like I always wanted to play soccer like growing up, and I didn't, like my parents didn't have me to where I could like go to play and stuff like that. So there's like certain things like that it's like, it's not that I had all those like, and I'm this now. It's more or less of like, okay, I looked at like, okay, first, like even how I got to college, I was like, okay, how do I make sure, like initially my plan was like, I wanted to buy a house. Like I wanted to buy a house by the time I got out of college, like, which was like a crazy idea. But I was like, okay, how am I going to do that? And I was like, okay, I'm going to make sure that my college is paid for, so I get enough scholarships so that then I like am not in debt, so that then, and then I'm like, and then I'm gonna get into real estate, so that then I'm gonna do real estate, so that that's gonna be able to build me the skills I want, so that I can build those business skills, but also know how to buy a house and like how to do that, because then later I want to like invest in more houses. So that even just doing that like was me looking at the resources of like, okay, this is all I have right now, but how do I use this for this so that it builds this?
You were puzzling.
Yeah.
You were literally just puzzling. But I think that's like the biggest thing, right? Like I think kind of as our sort of closing sentiment is like, people underestimate their power as people and they lack confidence.
Yeah.
And they misconstrue that they need to have skills to have confidence. And it's like, no, your confidence is either God-given or nature-given, whatever you prefer, but it's like, you're alive. You can wake up and breathe and walk and use your hands, you know, especially you don't have any right? Especially there's people out there that have nothing given to them and they're able to succeed. It's not because they're better or worse, but it's because they recognize that their confidence is their chance, right? Like their chance in life is what they should be confident about, is that they're here and they can do it. And a lot of people get lost on this journey. And the biggest thing is like, you don't know what you want to do. You don't know how to do it. You don't know where to do it. But many a times we are lacking the discipline to truly ask the questions of why we cannot figure out what we need to do. And then we don't end up doing those things, because oftentimes the answer is a couple hours studying, a couple hours of reading, some physical activity, and, you know, making enough money to survive, and then like doing that again every day. And people are, you know, it's hard to stay disciplined, but that's the biggest point, is like, we have to make sure that we're showing up and we're being confident in our abilities as people, because our abilities that we can learn and we can grow and we can change. And so I think that's a really empowering message, because you are a good example of someone who took a first generation approach, didn't have a lot of resources, but then comes at it and says, hey, as long as I do my best every day and I show up, like I have nothing to be worried about. I have nothing to feel guilt about. And in time, I will find what I've been looking for.
Yeah.
And it just takes impact and effort.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this is a great conversation. And I know that a lot of people will get tons of value out of it, seeing kind of the human side of you, because a lot of times people see big businesses and they see accolades and awards and they think, oh, that's so fun. It's like, we're all just people. We're all just regular people, and we just do work, and we just try and do stuff that we enjoy and like. And so I appreciate you taking the time today to talk more about the inner workings of your mind and the business. And so I think it's a great part for us to kind of close out. Is there any tips or advice or things that you want to give to any students or faculty or mentors or anyone that are watching now, whether it's about UMKC, whether it's about being an entrepreneur? Like, what's kind of one parting piece of advice you'd give them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, I feel like that I realized that initially, like, college was like, I was like, I feel like I'm getting scared of my money, you know, like this is just working to like get me to be a 9 to 5. And then when I realized that there's so many that I could use the resources, like, and all you got to do is use the resources, like, and that's a big thing, I think, is that like so many students want to do something that they literally have the resources right there. Like now, like in college, like so many mentors are like, I want a mentor, and there's not enough mentee. And it's like, how is that a thing? Like, they're these like professionals with 20 plus years of experience and been through this, and like they're like there for you to use it. And so I think it's just make sure you like use your resources and take advantage of them, because I realized that you know, like even coming out of college, like people don't actually have all those resources all the time. Like they're here for a limited time, and that's even a thing for me. It's like, how do I make the most of these resources right now to get me to a good position once I leave? So I would say that that. And the other thing is, I think a lot of students sometimes feel like, oh, I just want to, they think of entrepreneurship of like, I want to make money, and like that's how they think of it. But I think that a big thing is like, no, entrepreneurship is about serving, and like how do you make sure that you're serving and that you're helping in a way, like you're not there to like be the boss and like make a bunch of money. Like that's not the vision of it. Like, and if you're in it, then you're in it for the wrong reasons, because I really think entrepreneurship is about serving the people around you and like building things that help others.
Servant leadership.
So yeah, those would be my two nuggets there.
No, that's great. I mean, it connects back to like what we owe others as people, is like to bring our light to the world, to try and leave it a better place. And like, and the people who do that well get rewarded for that, not because they're looking for rewards, but because those are the ones that deserve it, right? And so we should all hope that we can find a path that allows us to engage in the things that we love. So for sure, thank you so much for listening today and learning more about, you know, what the UMKC school is all about, especially the Bloch School. I myself am also a graduate of UMKC's Bloch School and eScholars program. And, you know, it's just an amazing opportunity to be able to share more stories with everyone about the real people that make this program what it is, and the real people that carry this legacy from the scholastic environment into the real world, which is what this is all about. So thank you so much for taking the time to learn more about Leslie and Golazo and some of the things going on here. And we'll see you again very soon with our next guest.
Thank you.